What's good, Z Nation? We're back again today for another exciting episode of Scary Thursday, and we're gonna jump right into this because this looks like a good one. The scary gut-filling stories. So let's see what we have in store.
Have you ever had that feeling in the pit of your stomach that something just isn't quite right? You don't know where that's coming from, you can't really explain it to anyone else, but you can sense that something is going to go badly. For you, maybe your family, your friends, or maybe someone you don't even know. Have you ever acted on that feeling? Have you ever trusted your gut? I found some creepy stories of people who did just that, and it may have saved them or other people. My name is Danny Burke, and this is the top 10 scary gut feeling stories. Starting off at number 10 now, we have the serial killer. Yes, we are starting off with a very intense one right away. This one comes from Reddit user Archimedes, who said, "We had a serial killer in South Carolina a couple of years ago. No one knew what he looked like yet, but he had already killed 3 people at this point. Well, my granny has lived alone since my granddad passed about 15 years ago. She lived at the end of a long dirt road with about 10 other families, but the closest one was about a quarter of a mile up the road. One afternoon, some random guy comes knocking on the front door of her house. My granny is a practical woman. She has never been to school because she grew up on a farm and was expected to pull her weight, but she is a smart woman. She goes to her glass front door but doesn't open it. The 40-ish-year-old man is there asking if he can use a phone since his car broke down. Granny doesn't like the look of this guy. He doesn't live here. If he doesn't live here, there is no reason for him to be on this road, and if he was visiting someone, their house or anyone else's house would have been closer since she lives on a dead end. Anyway, she tells him that no, he can't use the phone and he needs to leave. She backs up and picks up my granddad's 410 as she goes. Once he sees the shotgun, he hightails it out of there. About a week later, the cops finally catch the serial killer, and lo and behold, it isn't the same damn man. Next up at number 9 now, we have the tornado. This is a short one that came from Reddit user Telegraph Kiss. They said, "I worked at a hospital PRN and frequently picked up extra shifts."
Fun fact, talking about tornado, I actually watched one form as I was going through Florida one day. I saw the clouds come together, and then I saw them do this number. And then next thing we know, there's tornado touching down, and it's a fun time.
I worked overnights and had asked the supervisor to go ahead and put me down to work the next night. Well, as the night went on, I just felt awful, like completely doomed. I had never wanted so badly to be home. I lived an hour away from my job. So by the morning, I called the supervisor and asked her to remove me from the schedule. So I went home feeling unexplainably scared. By the time I woke up, I was getting calls that an EF5 tornado had hit the town I worked in and the hospital I worked at. I found that one really interesting. They say that animals can sense impending natural disasters. Do you think humans can sort of tap into that ability as well? Moving on to number 8 now, we have helping a friend. This one came from Reddit user Calamity H. Jane. Their story sounds like it's come straight out of a gangster movie. Now that might sound cool, but how would you like to be in this situation? They said, "A few years ago, about 1 AM on a Sunday morning, I had to take my dog out before bed. I lived in a rough neighborhood, and I am a female, so I usually have my guard up regardless of the time. Before I left the apartment building, my gut told me something was up. The street was completely void of traffic and people, except for a van parked out to the side of the road. Outside of it were 3 people who I quickly identified as male. Right away, my reaction was to keep my head low, put my jacket hood up, and not bring attention to myself. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see they were struggling. On closer inspection, I see 2 of the men are holding up the other man between them. I make the assumption that they are just headed home after a night of heavy partying and they are just helping their friend get sick or something. I am telling myself this to ease my fears. Then they notice me and they stop everything and freeze. I thought this was odd and not good, so I dragged my dog straight back to the building. I don't even know if he got the chance to pee that night. I go to bed thinking nothing more of it, until it's time to take the dog out again in the morning. There was a notice in the elevator asking for witnesses as to exactly what I saw that evening because a dead body had been found. So this wasn't a friend of theirs after all, they were ditching a body. It still upsets me to this day, and I'll never ignore my intuition again. Next up at number 7 now, we have Katrina. This one came from Chanel number 5 on Reddit. This is a story that is very personal to them, but people all over the world will know what the event they're talking about is. They said, I've lived in South Louisiana my entire life, about an hour south of New Orleans. In July 2005, I was only 11 years old, I kept having this reoccurring nightmare of me lying in my backyard, staring at the sky, and suddenly a large brown wave of water, probably 30 feet high, came up and washed my entire neighborhood away. It would always end right after the wave crashed and I would wake up. Then Hurricane Katrina hit a month later. My hometown was out of power for 2 weeks, but thankfully no flooding. But then I had the same dream after Katrina hit, except I saw the aftermath. I kept seeing dead animals floating past me as I tried to swim to my house. When I woke up, I had this horrible feeling that something horrible was going to happen to us. Hurricane Rita was making landfall and we were waiting it out at my house. I kept telling my mom that I wanted to go to my aunt's house, which was in the parish north of us. She said no and told me to go back to sleep. About an hour later, the levees in my town broke and our entire town had an hour to evacuate. Most of our parish was under 6 feet of water. I lost 2 classmates and 6 family members. When we came back about a week later, everything was coated in mud. There were dozens of dead animals all over the road. Most of us were homeless for years after, but at least we were alive. So now, when I tell my mom something is up, she listens. Next up at number 6 now, we have 9/10. For those of you that are old enough to remember 9/11, it was a day many people will never forget. But how many people remember the day before? I guess that would be called 9/10. One Reddit user does, and here is why. They said, true story, I was a freshman in high school when 9/11 happened and was kind of a worrywart. I'd always watch the news and read the newspapers and had a solid understanding of who bin Laden was and what his goal was. I remember on 9/10 around 11 AM, I got a really bad feeling in my mind and went to the nurse's office. I called my mom and told her I wasn't feeling well and needed to get sent home from school. She was busy working and couldn't come get me, but said she would ask my grandfather if he could. He agreed and showed up within 30 minutes. When I got into his car, he looked at me and said, "You look fine." We talked for a good portion of the ride home, and at some point I remember saying to him I thought tomorrow was going to be the day the world ended. I believed wholeheartedly we were going to be attacked on a massive scale. I'm talking nukes and all of that. Obviously it wasn't that drastic, but still the next day was 9/11, and I'll never forget the feeling in my stomach during third period when my principal pulled my teacher from the classroom and she came back in and turned the TV on to see the first tower smoking. Haunting.
I remember.
Moving on to number 5 now, we have The Snatcher. This one comes from Reddit user Apple Bliss. Great name. They share a story that is every parent's worst nightmare, but luckily kids can sometimes have a strange intuition. Apple Bliss said, I think a gut feeling led to me not being kidnapped. I was maybe 9 at the time. I was in a department store wandering on my own when all of a sudden the most terrible gut-wrenching feeling came over me. I don't know how, but I knew I had to get back to my mom. I ran to the aisle she was in. A man hurriedly followed me into the aisle. When he saw I was with my mother, he stood there for a few seconds and stared at me before walking away. I will never forget that feeling or his terrifying face. Moving on to number 4 now, we have The Warning. This one came from Reddit user Belosi Dapper. I think this one would be scary just by itself, but the gut feeling makes it even better. They said when I was about 12 years old, I had a nightmare one night that I could see my identical twin sister standing outside of the porch, waving her arms at me as if to dissuade me from coming outside. She looked dead and was lit up by this eerie green light. It was so scary that I can still see it vividly in my mind today. When I woke up, my heart was thudding in my chest. Normally when I had a nightmare, and I often did as a kid, I would go wake up my stepmom, who would take me downstairs and make me some cocoa, and we would sit at the kitchen table and talk about it until I felt better. That night, for some reason, I stayed put in my bed and couldn't bring myself to wake her up. The next morning, we were awoken to shouting downstairs. A man who was drunk or stoned or something had broken into our back porch. The porch connected to the kitchen where I would have been with my stepmom. He stripped down naked inside the porch, messed with some of my dad's tools, and then at daybreak had gone outside when he heard our neighbor lay.
I'll be right back, getting a phone call. And I'm back. Sorry about that. People apparently don't know that I'm recording. Anyways.
lady hauling her trash to the curb tools, and then at daybreak had gone outside when he heard our neighbor lady hauling her trash to the curb. She thought it was my father and had called out to him, at which point he'd gone after her. Police were called and he was taken away. There were all kinds of hunting supplies, tools on that back porch, including a hatchet. I shudder to think what would have happened if we'd wandered downstairs in our nightgowns and he'd been just on the other side of a pane of glass. Thanks sis. Next up at number 3 now we have hanging knives. This one comes from Reddit user Deacon Nunu, who said he used to work as a security guard at a dormitory that used to be an old hotel. He prided himself on going down every dark hallway alone and leaving no stone unturned. He said, "One night I got to the double doors that went to a particularly dark hallway leading to the back entrance to the kitchen and I froze. No, I said to myself, I'm not going down there tonight." This was extremely out of character for me. I had no idea what would cause me to all of a sudden have so strong an urge to stay out of there, but it was like really strong, so I went with my gut. I was kind of embarrassed about it and didn't tell anyone. That night, at that exact same time, there was a strung out addict robbing the kitchen, and there were really sharp, gigantic cheese knives hanging all over the place, just in case he didn't have his own weapon. I'm pretty sure he would have attacked me as the only witness had I gone down there that night. Who knows who would have come out on top, but I like to think that something saved me that night. But if it was my subconscious, how did it assess that there was someone down there before I even opened up the doors? Moving on to number 2 now, we have the Detector.
Danger.
This one comes from Roscoe Cracks Corn, and it's a reminder that you should always check your smoke detector. Seriously, like after this video, go and check yours, or ask your parents to. This story is a good reminder why. They said, I was driving home from work one afternoon and was troubled by the thought it would be horrible if I turned the corner and found my house was on fire. I got home and my house was fine, but that afternoon I thought I need to check the smoke detector. I'd moved in a year and a half before and hadn't ever checked the smoke detector. I bought a couple of batteries a few days later with the intention of putting them in, but noticed the detector looked different than the usual battery operated ones I was accustomed to seeing. I didn't get around to actually checking it though. I mentioned it to my friend who said he'd get a ladder and help me check it. We didn't get round to that either. A few days later, I was awakened by my smoke detector at 4 AM. My house was burning. I got my kids out and my parrot with only my bathrobe on. It turned out that my smoke detector was hardwired. I'm alive only because of that. It was arson as well. No one was ever arrested. And finally, number 1 now, we have name and birthday. I had to put this story at the number 1 spot because it's scary, but also I have so much respect for the storyteller and their friend. You're about to see why. Their Reddit username is gmoney5786. They said, when I was in university, I was walking home from the bars in the Bywood Market in Ottawa with my roommate at the time. It was about 2:30 AM and we were looking forward to getting home and ordering some pizza when we came across 2 guys and a very drunk girl. Initially, we didn't think anything about it because it was a pretty common sight on a Friday, but as we walked behind them for a few minutes, we noticed how out of it she was. One of the guys was essentially carrying her and her clutch bag was loosely dangling from her limp wrist. Our street came up, but instead of turning down it, we decided to see what was going on. The guys explained that she was one of their girlfriends and had too much to drink, so they were taking her home. We asked them a few more questions: what bar they were at, where she lived, if she was an Ottawa University student, etc. They gave pretty convincing answers, but all seemed very uncomfortable and wanted us to go away. During the conversation, the guy holding his girlfriend shifted her position to get a better grip, which caused her arm to dangle down and drop her clutch. Before they could move, my roommate grabbed the clutch and took her ID. My roommate then asked if they knew her first and last name along with her birthday. This is where things changed. The other guy got really aggressive and confrontational, while the other went silent. They didn't know her name or her birthday. I then pulled out my phone and called the police. The guy dropped her and they took off running. We waited with her for about 10 minutes until the police and EMS got there. We gave a statement but did not have much to go on other than their descriptions. Police told us they suspected she had been dosed and that she was lucky we happened to be walking behind her. Pretty scary stuff. Wow, do you see what I mean? I've got a lot of respect for people who stand up for the right thing, even in those kind of situations, even if it's a tough thing to do and a little bit scary. Anyway, topic of the video was gut feelings, so tell me about any gut feelings you've had about people or situations that turned out to be right. Also, have you ever had a gut feeling that turned out to be completely wrong, and maybe it actually made things worse for you? Perhaps that can be the subject of our next video. Let me know. Until next time, guys, thanks as always for watching. My name is Danny Burke, and I will see you all in the next video.
No, you won't, because you quit. I remember when you quit. Actually, 2009. Nah, you must be back. I thought you quit, because I didn't watch these since like 2018. Anyways, sorry about that break. Try not to let that happen again. And I hope y'all enjoyed this. I did. That was wild stuff. But that just goes to show, always trust your senses, man. You never know when that might save your life. So, real stories that will terrify you marathon 30 minutes. I'm good. Sorry about that. Anyways, if y'all like this, be sure to leave a like, comment, anything else you want me to check out. Be sure to subscribe. Might have a competition coming up for y'all sometime in the future, so definitely make sure you subscribe. Trying to work out all the bugs right now, make sure everything's good. So yeah, subscribe and stay tuned. Hope y'all have a good one. Deuces!